Emily Carter sat on the edge of the park bench, her gaze fixed on the gray clouds rolling over the city skyline. The cold October wind tugged at her thin jacket, but she barely noticed the chill. Her hands trembled slightly, clutching a crumpled letter she had reread more times than she could count. The words on the page blurred together, a painful echo of everything she wished she could undo. Just days ago, her world had turned upside down. A breakup she never saw coming, and the overwhelming news that she was pregnant. Alone and adrift, Emily felt as if the ground beneath her feet had given way, leaving her suspended in a void of crushing uncertainty. She had once imagined her life unfolding in a neat, predictable way. Finishing college, marrying the right person, building a home filled with laughter. But now, each step forward felt like a stumble into the unknown. The man she had trusted with her heart was gone, his final words cold and distant. And the pregnancy, a secret she hadn't been ready to face, loomed over her like a storm cloud threatening to drown out any hope she had left. The tiny life growing within her was a reminder of a future she hadn't planned, and a past she couldn't change. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. The city around her bustled with the usual rhythm of hurried footsteps and distant car horns. But Emily felt detached, as though she existed on a different plane. One where time slowed and the noise faded into a dull hum. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, seeking comfort in the small physical barrier between her and the world. At 22, she had never felt so vulnerable, so utterly alone. With a sigh, Emily stood and began to walk aimlessly through the park, her boots crunching on the scattered leaves. The trees, stripped bare by the coming winter, seemed to reach out with skeletal fingers, mirroring the emptiness she felt inside. She wandered without direction, each step heavier than the last, until the sounds of the city began to soften behind her. The manicured paths gave way to a narrow dirt trail winding into a dense stand of trees she had never noticed before. Curiosity stirred faintly amid her despair, and she followed the path deeper into the woods. The air grew cooler here, tinged with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. The canopy above filtered the fading sunlight into a gentle, dappled glow that danced across the underbrush. As she walked, the noise of traffic and distant voices dwindled to a whisper, replaced by the rustle of wind through branches and the occasional call of a bird. After several minutes, the trail opened into a small clearing, and there, nestled among the trees, stood a weathered shack. Its wooden boards were faded and cracked, the roof sagging slightly under years of neglect. Vines curled around the frame, and the windows were clouded with dust. The shack looked forgotten, a relic from another time, hidden away from the world's relentless pace. Yet, to Emily, it seemed like an unexpected refuge. A quiet place where she could pause, away from the judgment and noise that crowded her mind. She hesitated at the edge of the clearing, the weight of her situation pressing down on her chest. But something about the shack's quiet presence called to her. Tentatively, she stepped closer, her fingers brushing against the rough wood of the door, which swung open with a creak. Inside, the space was bare but surprisingly clean. A small room with a simple wooden table, a cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall, and a single chair pushed against the far corner. Dust motes floated lazily in the shafts of light that spilled through the grimy windows. Emily sank onto the chair, the stillness of the shack wrapping around her like a fragile shield. For the first time in days, the relentless storm inside her heart softened, replaced by a flicker of calm. Here, in this forgotten place, She could breathe. She could think without the weight of expectation or fear pressing down on her. As she looked around, she noticed the faint traces of someone's past life etched into the walls. Faded pencil marks, a scrap of torn fabric caught on a nail, the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air. It was as if the shack held memories, stories waiting to be uncovered. And for Emily, those stories felt like a lifeline, a chance to find solace in the quiet company of a place that had weathered hardship and time, just as she was trying to do now. She pulled her coat tighter around her and settled back into the chair, the creaking wood beneath her grounding her in the present. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the promise of change. Emily closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself to imagine a future not yet written, a future where fear gave way to hope, and solitude blossomed into strength. For now, the shack was her sanctuary, a small island of peace amid the chaos of her life. And as the afternoon light waned, casting long shadows across the floor, Emily felt the first fragile glimmer of something she hadn't dared to hope for. A moment of quiet, a breath of relief, and the possibility of a new beginning. The evening settled over the woods, bringing a cool hush that wrapped around Emily like a blanket. She sat on the creaky wooden chair inside the shack, the fading light casting long shadows across the bare floorboards. Her mind drifted back to the moments that had led her here. The sharp sting of heartbreak, the sudden shock of discovering she was pregnant, and the overwhelming weight of loneliness that now pressed down on her chest. Just a week ago, she had been sitting across from James in their small apartment, the walls closing in as his words cut through her like ice. "I can't do this," he had said, flatly, eyes avoiding hers. "I'm sorry, Emily. It's over." The words echoed relentlessly in her mind, replaying over and over like a cruel refrain. She had begged, pleaded for understanding, for a chance to fix what was broken, but he was already gone emotionally, leaving her alone with a secret she hadn't yet shared. The news of her pregnancy had been a shock, a mixture of fear, disbelief, and a strange, fragile hope. She remembered the moment she saw the 2 pink lines on the test, her hands shaking as the reality settled in. She had wanted to tell James, to share this new life growing inside her, but his sudden departure had silenced that possibility. Now, the secret weighed heavily on her, a burden she carried alone. Physically, the early days of pregnancy brought their own challenges. The nausea that rose in the mornings, the exhaustion that dragged at her limbs, and the sharp pangs of uncertainty gnawed at her spirit. She found herself retreating from friends and family, unable to explain the turmoil she felt. Each day blurred into the next, a cycle of emotional upheaval and physical strain that left her feeling fragile and isolated. In the quiet of the shack, Emily allowed herself to feel the full extent of her vulnerability. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she clutched the letter from James, the final confirmation that she was on her own. The ache of loss was raw, but beneath it, a tiny spark of determination flickered. She did not yet know where this path would lead, but she knew she had to find a way forward, not just for herself, but for the life she carried within her. As the night deepened, Emily wrapped herself in an old blanket she found folded on a dusty shelf. The shack was cold and drafty, but its stillness offered a strange comfort. She pulled her knees to her chest and took slow, steady breaths, trying to calm the storm of fear and doubt swirling inside her. The shadows danced on the walls like silent witnesses to her struggle. But she refused to let them consume her. In the darkness, her thoughts turned to the future. What kind of mother would she be? How would she navigate the challenges ahead without the support she had once counted on? The questions were daunting, but amid the uncertainty, a quiet resolve began to take shape. She would face this alone if she had to, but she would not let despair define her. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the grimy windows, painting the shack in pale gold. Emily woke with a sense of cautious hope, the first flicker of light after a long night of turmoil. She rose slowly, the stiffness in her limbs a reminder of the physical toll her body was enduring. Yet, as she moved about the small space, she felt a subtle shift within, a growing strength born from acceptance and the will to survive. She gathered a few dry twigs from outside and managed to coax a small fire in the rusty old stove, the warmth spreading through the room like a balm. As the flames flickered, Emily pulled out a worn notebook she had found tucked beneath a loose floorboard. The pages were yellowed and filled with neat handwriting, letters, poems, and reflections from someone who had once sought refuge in this very shack. Reading the words, Emily felt a strange kinship with the unknown writer. Their struggles, fears, and hopes mirrored her own, bridging the gap between past and present. The writer's courage to face hardship without surrendering gave Emily a glimmer of inspiration. She realized she was not the first to walk this path of uncertainty, and that within the shack's walls, resilience had taken root before. As the day wore on, Emily forced herself to eat a small meal, the nausea still lurking but less overpowering. She sipped water slowly, trying to nurture the fragile life growing inside her with every careful choice. The physical demands of pregnancy were daunting, but they reminded her that she was connected to something greater than herself, a tiny heartbeat that pulsed with quiet insistence. Despite the solitude, Emily felt the beginnings of a new routine forming. She took small walks around the clearing, breathing in the crisp air and listening to the gentle rustle of the trees. The natural world around her seemed to offer a silent encouragement, a reminder that life persisted even in the harshest conditions. The birdsong and the whisper of the wind became companions in her solitude, easing the ache of loneliness. Yet, beneath the fragile peace, doubts lingered like shadows. Would she be able to provide for a child on her own? How would she face the judgment of those who didn't understand? The future was an uncertain path, and fear often threatened to overwhelm her. But each time the darkness crept in, Emily found herself returning to the quiet strength she glimpsed in the shack's faded writings and in the small moments of stillness around her. As evening fell once more, Emily sat by the fire, the notebook resting on her lap. She traced the lines of the pages with her fingers, drawing comfort from the words etched long ago. The shack had become more than a refuge. It was a place of healing, a sanctuary where pain could be acknowledged and hope could quietly take root. Though the road ahead was daunting, Emily's resolve grew steadier. The weight of her past heartbreak and the physical challenges of pregnancy were heavy, but they no longer felt insurmountable. In the silence of the shack, she began to find a flicker of light, a fragile promise that despite the hardships, she could forge a new path forward. With a deep breath, Emily closed the notebook and looked out the window at the darkening sky. Somewhere beyond the shadows, a new day awaited. And though she did not yet know what it would bring, she was beginning to believe that she could face it. With courage, with hope, and with the quiet strength born from the depths of her struggle. The dawn broke with a muted glow, soft rays of light, filtering through the grimy windows of the shack, casting a pale warmth over the worn floorboards. Emily stirred from a restless sleep, the night's dreams tangled with fragments of fear and hope. She sat up slowly, the ache in her body a quiet reminder of the changes unfolding within her. The shack, once an unfamiliar refuge, had begun to feel like a fragile sanctuary, a place where the noise of the world fell away and she could simply be, if only for a moment. But the stillness that comforted her also brought with it the undeniable truth. She could not stay here forever. The life she left behind, the city, her friends, the remnants of a past she was trying to escape, waited beyond the trees. And deep inside, Emily knew that healing required more than solitude. It required courage, the difficult choice to face the unknown and take steps toward rebuilding. That morning, Emily stood at the threshold of the shack, her breath misting in the crisp air. The small clearing around her was bathed in soft light, the forest stretching out in quiet invitation. She took a tentative step onto the dirt path, feeling the crunch of leaves beneath her boots. Each step was heavy with uncertainty, but also with a quiet determination, and she was learning to trust. She had made the decision to leave the city behind, at least for a time. The constant reminders of what she had lost, the empty apartment, the silent phone, the familiar streets now tinged with pain, had become too much to bear. She needed distance, a chance to breathe and find clarity away from the suffocating expectations and judgments that weighed on her like chains. The journey into the woods had been gradual, driven by an impulse to escape and a faint hope for solace. As she walked, the sounds of the city faded into a gentle murmur, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. The air smelled of earth and pine, fresh and pure, a stark contrast to the smog and noise she had left behind. After a long, solitary walk along the winding trail, Emily arrived at the shack once more. Its weathered frame stood in quiet defiance against the passage of time, a hidden refuge she had stumbled upon in her moment of need. The door creaked open easily, revealing the simple interior bathed in the soft afternoon light. The air inside was cool, carrying the faint scent of aged wood and forgotten memories. She stepped inside with a mixture of hesitation and relief. The shack was bare but orderly, a blank canvas on which she could begin to rebuild. The small table in the corner held the notebook she had found days ago, its pages filled with the words of a stranger whose courage now seemed intertwined with her own. Emily set down her bag and took a deep breath, letting the quiet settle around her. Exploring the space, she noted the sparse furnishings, a cracked mirror hanging slightly askew, the single chair she had claimed as her own, and a stack of faded newspapers tucked beneath a loose floorboard. The simplicity of the shack was both humbling and reassuring, a place stripped of distractions, where she could focus on the bare essentials of survival and healing. Yet, beneath the calm surface, a flicker of unease stirred within her. The isolation that had once offered comfort now felt like a double-edged sword. The silence was heavy, pressing in on her thoughts and fears. She realized that while the shack provided shelter, it did not erase the loneliness or the uncertainty that clung to her like a shadow. Determined to create a sense of order and purpose, Emily began to clear a small corner near the window, sweeping away dust and cobwebs with a worn rag. The act of cleaning was grounding, a tangible way to reclaim the space and, in a small way, herself. She arranged the few belongings she had brought with care, a blanket, a notebook, a modest supply of food, and set about establishing a routine. As evening approached, Emily lit a small lantern, its warm glow filling the room with a gentle light. She sat by the window, watching the forest darken into shades of deep blue and black. The quiet was profound, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig or the distant call of an owl. In this solitude, she found space to breathe, to think, and to begin tentatively imagining what might come next. The shack, bare and unassuming, had become a refuge not just from the world, but from the whirlwind inside her own heart. It offered a place to pause, to gather strength, and to face the uncertainty ahead. Emily knew the road would be difficult, filled with moments of doubt and fear. But here, amid the whispering trees and the fading light, she felt the first stirrings of resilience. Before sleep claimed her again, she pulled the notebook from the table and read a few lines from the worn pages. The words spoke of endurance and hope, of finding light in the darkest of places. They resonated deeply, a quiet reminder that even in the face of hardship, the human spirit could endure and heal. Emily closed the notebook gently and placed it beside her bedroll. As she settled beneath a thin blanket, the shack around her seemed less empty, filled instead with the echoes of strength and courage left behind by another who had walked this path. The journey ahead was unknown, but in this small, forgotten place, Emily had found a fragile beginning, a chance to rediscover herself and to face the future, one uncertain step at a time. Days passed in the quiet rhythm of the shack, each one folding into the next with a gentle predictability that both comforted and unsettled Emily. The small space had become a cocoon where she could retreat from the chaos of her past. Yet the stillness also stirred a restless curiosity within her, a yearning to understand the stories etched into the walls and shadows around her. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered weakly through the grimy windows, Emily knelt on the creaking floorboards, drawn by a faint outline beneath a loose plank near the corner. Her fingers traced the edges carefully, lifting the board to reveal a hidden compartment carved into the wood. Heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and hesitation, she reached inside and pulled out a bundle wrapped in yellowed paper, brittle with age. Unfolding the fragile sheets, Emily discovered a collection of letters, their ink faded but still legible. Each one was addressed to a woman named Rose, written in a careful, flowing script. The letters spoke of hardship and hope, loneliness and resilience, a window into a life lived long ago within these very woods. Alongside the letters lay a small, worn photograph of a young woman with kind eyes and a tentative smile, the edges curled and softened by time. As Emily read through the letters, she found herself drawn into Rose's world. The words revealed a woman grappling with isolation, burdened by circumstances that echoed her own struggles. Rose wrote of days spent in solitude, of battles fought within and without, and of a fierce determination to survive despite the odds. There were mentions of a lost love, of dreams deferred, and of a quiet strength forged in the crucible of hardship. The connection between their lives was uncanny. Though separated by years, Emily felt a kinship with Rose, a shared experience of loneliness and the search for solace in a place that held both refuge and memories. The shack was no longer just a shelter. It was a repository of stories, a testament to the resilience of those who had come before. With each letter, Emily's sense of isolation softened. She was not alone in her pain or her hope. The past occupant's words became a source of comfort and courage, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was a spark that could not be extinguished. Rose's voice, preserved in ink and paper, whispered encouragement across the years, urging Emily to hold fast and find her own path forward. As the afternoon waned, Emily carefully replaced the letters in the compartment and secured the floorboard. She sat back on her heels, the weight of the discovery settling around her like a gentle embrace. The shack, once a simple refuge, had revealed itself as a vessel of history and healing, a place where stories intertwined and lives touched across time. In the days that followed, Emily found herself returning to the letters again and again. She copied passages into her own notebook, drawing strength from Rose's reflections and wisdom. The writings became a guide through her own turmoil, offering perspectives that helped her navigate fear and uncertainty with a growing sense of resolve. The forest outside mirrored this transformation. The changing light filtered through the trees with a softer glow, the rustle of leaves carrying a quiet promise of renewal. Emily began to see her surroundings not as a place of escape, but as a landscape of possibility, a space where she could rebuild and grow. Amid this newfound connection, Emily also noticed subtle signs of life within the shack that hinted at stories yet untold. A faded scarf tucked behind a loose shutter, a carefully carved symbol etched into the window frame, and the faint scent of lavender lingering in the corners. All fragments of Rose's presence that added depth to the tapestry of memory. One evening, as twilight deepened and the forest settled into a hushed stillness, Emily sat by the small stove, the glow of the fire flickering against the walls. She pulled out the letters once more, reading aloud passages that spoke of endurance and hope. The act of voicing Rose's words transformed them from distant echoes into living truths, weaving a thread of continuity that bridged past and present. In these moments, Emily felt a profound shift within herself. The shack was no longer merely a refuge from her pain, but a place of belonging, a sanctuary where the stories of two women, separated by time but united in spirit, converged. The discovery of Rose's letters had breathed life into the silent walls, filling the space with a quiet power that nurtured Emily's fragile hope. As night fell, Emily placed the letters back into their hidden compartment and closed the floorboard with care. She lingered for a moment, listening to the soft crackle of the fire and the distant call of an owl. The shack, with all its secrets and stories, had become a companion in her journey, a beacon of resilience, and a reminder that even in solitude, she was connected to something greater than herself. With a deep breath, Emily settled beneath her blanket, the weight of the past and the promise of the future mingling in her heart. The shack held its secrets close, but through the letters of a woman named Rose, it had offered Emily a gift far beyond shelter, a glimmer of understanding, a thread of hope, and the courage to face the days ahead. Days in the shack unfolded with a gentle rhythm, each one shaped by quiet moments of reflection and small acts of care. Emily found herself drawn repeatedly to the letters she had discovered, their fragile pages offering a lifeline of wisdom and strength. Sitting by the flickering firelight, she traced the words of Rose, absorbing the courage woven into each sentence. The letters spoke not only of survival, but of a quiet defiance, a refusal to be broken by circumstance. As Emily read, she began to see her own fears mirrored in Rose's struggles, and with each parallel, a subtle healing took root. The past occupant's reflections became a mirror for her own heartache, illuminating paths through the darkness that once seemed impassable. The shack, once merely a shelter from the storm, transformed into a place of growth and renewal. Outside, the forest responded to the changing season with a muted palette of browns and golds. The crisp air carried the earthy scent of fallen leaves and damp soil, a reminder of nature's cycles of decay and rebirth. Emily found solace in the simplicity of the woods, the steady rhythm of wind through branches, the distant call of a bird, the soft crunch of leaves beneath her boots. These small details anchored her, offering a steadying presence amid the turmoil within. Each morning, she rose with a quiet purpose, determined to nurture both herself and the life growing inside her. The physical demands of early pregnancy remained a constant challenge, waves of nausea, fatigue that settled deep into her bones. But she met them with a new patience and gentleness. She prepared modest meals, focusing on nourishing foods she could tolerate, and sipped water slowly throughout the day, mindful of the fragile balance she was cultivating. Emily began to carve out a daily routine, a simple structure that lent order to the uncertainty. Mornings were spent tending to the small tasks around the shack, sweeping the floorboards, gathering firewood, and tidying the sparse furnishings. Afternoons unfolded with moments of quiet reading and journaling. She wrote her own thoughts alongside the words of Rose, creating a tapestry of past and present that wove together her fears, hopes, and dreams. The act of journaling became a sacred ritual, a way to process the whirlwind of emotions that surged beneath the surface. Emily poured her heart onto the pages, unfiltered and raw, capturing the doubts that whispered in the dark and the flickers of hope that dared to shine. The shack's walls seemed to hold her words gently, bearing witness to her journey without judgment. Nature itself became a balm for her weary spirit. On cooler afternoons, she ventured beyond the clearing, walking slowly through the woods with careful steps. The rhythm of her footsteps on the leaf-strewn path and the chorus of the forest around her offered a meditation of sorts, a chance to breathe deeply and find peace beyond the confines of her thoughts. She found particular comfort in a small patch of wildflowers near a babbling brook, their delicate petals bright against the muted earth. Sitting quietly among them, Emily felt a connection to life's resilience, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, beauty and growth were possible. The forest's quiet persistence echoed her own emerging determination to endure and thrive. Despite the gradual healing, the shack's isolation sometimes pressed heavily on her heart. Loneliness crept in during the long evenings, a shadow that no amount of reading or journaling could fully dispel. Emily missed the warmth of human connection, the comfort of a friend's voice, the simple presence of another soul. Yet, she also recognized that this solitude was part of her path, a crucible in which her strength was being forged. One evening, as twilight deepened into night, Emily lit a small candle and sat near the window, the flickering flame casting dancing shadows on the walls. She opened her notebook and reread a passage from Rose's letters. In the quiet, I found my voice. In the stillness, I discovered my strength. The words resonated deeply, a balm to a restless heart. Inspired, Emily resolved to embrace the solitude, not as a punishment, but as an opportunity, a chance to listen to the whispers of her own spirit and to nurture the fragile life within. She folded her notebook carefully and placed it beside her bedroll, a small talisman of hope and resilience. As the days turned to weeks, a new rhythm took hold in the shack. Emily's body changed with a slow, steady progression of pregnancy. Each milestone met with a mix of awe and trepidation. She learned to honor her limits, resting when exhaustion overtook her and moving gently when strength returned. The shack bore silent witness to these transformations, its humble walls enclosing a world of quiet courage. In this space of reflection and care, Emily began to imagine a future beyond the immediate struggles, a life shaped by possibility rather than fear. The shack, once a refuge born of desperation, had become a sanctuary of healing, a place where past and present converged to light a path forward. With each sunrise, she greeted the day with a tentative hope, a belief that despite the challenges, she could find a way to build a life for herself and her child. The forest outside remained steadfast, It cycles a reminder that even after loss and hardship, renewal awaited. And so, in the quiet heart of the woods, surrounded by the echoes of a woman named Rose, Emily Carter began to piece together the fragments of her shattered world. Through the healing power of nature, words, and solitude, she took the first steps toward reclaiming her strength and embracing the fragile promise of tomorrow. The soft crunch of footsteps on the forest floor startled Emily one cool morning as she gathered firewood near the edge of the clearing. She turned sharply, heart pounding, to see a man emerging from the trees, a stranger whose presence was both unexpected and oddly comforting in the solitude of the woods. His clothes were simple, weathered but clean, and his eyes held a gentle warmth that eased some of the tension coiling inside her. "Sorry if I startled you," he said with a tentative smile, stepping closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "I didn't mean to intrude. I come this way sometimes when I'm out hiking." Emily hesitated, her instincts wary but softened by the kindness in his voice. "It's okay," she replied quietly. "I'm just staying here for a while." He nodded, glancing around at the shack nestled among the trees. "It's a good spot. Quiet. Sometimes that's what we need most." His name was Daniel, and as they talked, Emily learned that he was a local who had grown up in the nearby town, familiar with the woods and the stories that surrounded them. His presence was steady and unassuming, a stark contrast to the turmoil she carried within. Despite her initial reluctance, Emily found herself drawn to his easy manner and the genuine interest he showed without pressing for details. Over the following days, Daniel returned, often stopping by the clearing with a basket of wild herbs or fresh water from a nearby spring. He never intruded, but offered companionship in a way that felt safe. A quiet presence that filled the empty spaces without overwhelming them. Their shared silences became comfortable, the simple act of sitting together by the fire a balm to Emily's loneliness. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, Daniel shared stories of his own struggles, times when life had tested him and the ways he found to persevere. His tales were marked by honesty and resilience, a mirror to Emily's own journey. In his company, she glimpsed the possibility of connection and support beyond the walls of the shack. Emily began to open up cautiously, revealing fragments of her story in the soft glow of twilight. Daniel listened without judgment, offering understanding instead of pity. His presence became a thread of hope weaving through her days, reminding her that she was not alone, even in the depths of her solitude. Together, they explored the woods, Daniel pointing out edible plants and sharing knowledge of natural remedies. These excursions brought a sense of purpose and discovery, grounding Emily in the present and fostering a growing trust between them. The forest, once a place of isolation, transformed into a shared sanctuary where healing could unfold. One evening, as they sat by the flickering firelight, Emily confessed her fears about the future, the uncertainty of impending motherhood, the weight of responsibility, and the loneliness that still lingered. Daniel's response was gentle but firm. "You don't have to face this alone," he said. "Sometimes, strength comes from letting others in." His words resonated deeply, stirring a shift within Emily. The shack, which had been a refuge from the world, was now a bridge to it, a place where connection could begin anew. The walls that once enclosed her isolation began to feel more like a home, built not just of wood and memories, but of shared understanding. As the days grew shorter and the air crisper, Emily found herself looking forward to Daniel's visits, the simple companionship a balm to her weary spirit. With his support, She began to envision a future where she could face challenges not as a solitary figure, but as part of a community, however small and tentative. The forest around them held its usual quiet beauty. The rustle of leaves, the call of distant birds, the gentle whisper of the wind through branches. But within the clearing, a new warmth blossomed, born of friendship and the fragile hope that even in the darkest times, human connection could light the way forward. One afternoon, Daniel brought a small bundle of fresh bread and berries, placing them on the table inside the shack. "For you," he said simply. "A little something to make things easier." Emily accepted the gift with a smile, the gesture more meaningful than the food itself. It was a sign that she was not forgotten, that kindness could still find her here in the woods. As twilight settled over the clearing, Emily sat by the window, the soft glow of the lantern casting gentle shadows. She thought of the journey she had taken, from heartbreak and fear to this quiet moment of companionship. The shack, once a symbol of solitude, had become a place where trust could grow. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel the fragile but growing strength within. A strength nurtured not only by the solitude of the forest, but by the unexpected presence of a friend who had chosen to walk beside her, if only for a while. The night settled over the shack with a weight that pressed heavily on Emily's chest, the silence around her thick and suffocating. She sat curled on the wooden floor, the flickering lantern casting trembling shadows across the walls. Inside her, a storm raged, a tempest of doubt, fear, and overwhelming uncertainty that gnawed relentlessly at her resolve. Earlier that day, a wave of anxiety had crashed over her with terrifying force. The reality of her pregnancy, the looming responsibilities, and the loneliness that still clung stubbornly to her spirit threatened to unravel everything she had fought so hard to hold together. Tears had spilled silently as she stared into the cracked mirror, barely recognizing the woman who looked back, fragile, scared, and utterly unprepared for the future. A sudden surge of panic gripped her, and she found herself pacing the small space, hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the wooden table. Every fear she had buried bubbled to the surface. How would she provide for the child? Who would help her? Could she face the world alone, without the support she had lost? The shack, once a refuge, now felt like a cage closing in on her. In the depths of the night, her mind spiraled toward the darkest thoughts. The temptation to abandon the fragile peace she had found nearly overwhelming. The weight of everything seemed unbearable, and she wondered if she could endure another day. But then, amidst the turmoil, a quiet voice broke through the chaos. Rose's voice, carried across time in the delicate pages of the letters Emily had come to treasure. She reached for the worn notebook, fingers trembling as she opened to a passage that spoke of courage born in the face of despair. Rose's words were simple but profound. In the darkest moments, we find the strength we did not know we had. Emily read the lines aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. The act of speaking the words gave them power, anchoring her wavering heart. She closed her eyes and let the wisdom seep into her bones, a lifeline thrown across the chasm of her fears. Drawing a deep, shaky breath, Emily forced herself to sit down and meet the panic head-on. She began to list the things she could control, the small steps she could take to care for herself and the child growing inside her. She reminded herself that fear was a natural response, but it did not have to dictate her future. The night stretched on, but slowly, Emily's trembling subsided. She wrapped herself in the worn blanket, the fabric a fragile shield against the darkness. The shack, with its quiet walls and the echoes of another woman's courage, held her gently as she vowed to face the days ahead. with renewed determination. In the morning light, the world seemed softer, less threatening. Emily rose with a tentative hope, the shadows of doubt pushed back by the promise of a new day. She carried Rose's legacy within her, the strength to confront fear and the resolve to embrace the uncertain path ahead. With each breath, Emily reaffirmed her commitment to herself and the life she nurtured. The shack, a silent witness to her struggle, stood steady around her, a place where courage was born and hope quietly blossomed, even in the face of darkness. The morning light filtered softly through the shack's dusty windows as Emily moved about the small space with a quiet sense of purpose. Days had passed since the night when fear had almost overwhelmed her, and though uncertainty still lingered like a shadow, she felt a renewed strength settling within. The shack, once simply a shelter, had become a place where hope quietly took root. As she tidied the corner near the window, a glint caught her eye, a small, weathered box tucked behind a loose board. Curiosity stirred, and Emily carefully pried it free, brushing away layers of dust and cobwebs. The box was old, its wood worn smooth by time, and it bore delicate carvings that hinted at a story waiting to be uncovered. With trembling fingers, she lifted the lid and discovered inside a locket, its silver surface dulled but still gleaming faintly. Nestled beside it was a folded note, the paper fragile and yellowed at the edges. Emily unfolded the note carefully, her eyes scanning the neat handwriting that seemed to pulse with quiet urgency. "Live boldly and love fiercely," the note read, "to the finder of this box. May you find the courage to embrace life's trials and the strength to hold on to hope." The words struck a deep chord within Emily, resonating with the journey she had undertaken in this secluded refuge. The locket, small and unassuming, felt like a talisman, a symbol of the resilience needed to face the unknown. She clasped it gently in her hand, the cool metal grounding her in the present and the promise it held. For a moment, Emily allowed herself to imagine the woman who had left this gift behind. Perhaps it was Rose, the woman whose letters had offered so much comfort and wisdom. This keepsake was more than an object. It was a beacon, a tangible connection across time that whispered of endurance and hope. Inspired by the discovery, Emily slipped the locket around her neck, its weight both comforting and empowering. It became a quiet reminder of the strength she was cultivating. Strength born not only of survival, but of the choice to live boldly, to love fiercely, and to embrace whatever lay ahead. With the locket resting against her heart, Emily began to envision a future painted with possibility rather than fear. She allowed herself to dream of a life where hope was not just a fragile flicker, but a steady flame, guiding her steps forward. The shack, with all its memories and secrets, had become a sanctuary where healing and courage intertwined. That day, Emily sat by the window, the soft light warming her face as she wrote in her notebook. Each word was infused with the newfound purpose the locket inspired, a declaration of intent to face the challenges of motherhood and life with determination and grace. The simple act of writing became an anchor, a way to chart her journey from despair to hope. Outside, the forest stood silent witness, its ancient trees swaying gently in the breeze. The natural world around her mirrored the transformation unfolding within, a quiet testament to resilience, renewal, and the enduring power of connection. As evening approached, Emily placed the locket carefully on the table beside her notebook, the note folded beneath it like a sacred promise. The shack, once a place of refuge from pain and uncertainty, had become a symbol of strength and renewal. a stepping stone toward a future shaped by courage and love. With a deep breath, she settled beneath her blanket, the locket's cool touch a steady presence against her skin. The path ahead was still unknown, but Emily Carter carried within her the legacy of those who had come before, the gift of hope, and the quiet conviction that she could face whatever lay ahead, with boldness, with love, and with unwavering strength. The morning air was crisp and cool as Emily stepped out of the shack, the soft crunch of leaves beneath her boots mingling with the distant call of birds waking to a new day. For the first time in weeks, she felt a stirring of readiness, a fragile but growing sense that the world beyond the trees was no longer something to fear, but a place to re-engage with, cautiously and on her own terms. She paused at the edge of the clearing, taking in the quiet beauty of the forest, the gentle sway of branches, and the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. The shack behind her stood as a silent witness to the journey she had traveled, from despair and solitude to a tentative hope that had begun to take root within her. Emily knew it was time to step back into the world she had left behind, to reach out to those she had distanced herself from, and to build a support system for the life growing inside her. The thought was both daunting and necessary. She carried with her the lessons learned in the quiet refuge of the shack, the strength drawn from the letters of Rose and the keepsake that rested close to her heart. She pulled her coat tighter around her and began the walk back toward the main road, each step a quiet affirmation of her resolve. The familiar sights of the nearby town emerged gradually, the worn benches of the bus stop, the storefronts with faded signs, the hum of everyday life continuing as if she had never left. But Emily saw these places anew, through eyes shaped by the healing she had found in the woods. Her first stop was the small community center, a place she had once hesitated to enter. Inside, the warmth and friendly faces reminded her that connection was possible, that she was not alone. She spoke briefly with a counselor, sharing fragments of her story and receiving gentle encouragement. The conversation felt like a bridge, a step toward rebuilding the network of support she would need. Over the following days, Emily made tentative calls to family members she had avoided, reaching out with honesty and vulnerability. Some responses were cautious, others surprised, but none dismissive. Slowly, she began to weave a safety net of care, recognizing that accepting help was not a sign of weakness, but an act of courage. Throughout this process, she carried Rose's spirit with her, the woman who had faced hardship with quiet strength and had left behind words and tokens of hope. Emily felt a deep gratitude for that connection across time, a reminder that resilience was not born in isolation, but in the shared human experience of struggle and perseverance. Back in the shack, she continued her daily rituals of journaling and reflection, grounding herself in the lessons of the past as she navigated the uncertainties of the present. The forest remained a sanctuary she could return to when the world felt overwhelming, a place where the whispers of the trees and the rustling leaves offered solace and perspective. With each visit to the outside world, Emily's confidence grew, the fog of fear lifting incrementally to reveal glimpses of a future she could shape. She began to explore local resources for expectant mothers, gathering information and planning for the practical needs of her child. The path ahead was still uncertain, but it was no longer shrouded in darkness. One afternoon, seated by the window of the shack with a notebook open on her lap, Emily reflected on the transformation that had brought her here. From the depths of heartbreak and solitude had blossomed a fragile but resilient hope, a testament to the power of healing, connection, and the human spirit's capacity to endure. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the clearing, Emily felt a quiet peace settle within her. She was ready to face the world again, carrying the lessons of the shack and the legacy of Rose's courage as a steady light to guide her steps. With a deep breath, she closed her notebook and looked out at the fading light, embracing the promise of the future and the strength she had found in the journey back to herself. A year had passed since Emily Carter first stepped into the quiet refuge of the shack hidden among the trees, a place that had transformed her life in ways she could never have anticipated. The woman who now stood at the doorway of a cozy, sunlit home was both changed and strengthened by the journey she had undertaken, carrying within her the legacy of resilience and hope that had blossomed from that small, forgotten cabin. Inside the warmly furnished living room, the soft coos and gentle movements of a baby filled the air. Emily cradled her daughter, Lily, whose bright eyes mirrored the quiet strength of her mother. The room was filled with light and love, a far cry from the shadows of fear and uncertainty that had once clouded Emily's heart. The walls bore photographs and mementos, a testament to the family and friendships she had rebuilt, the community that had embraced them both. The shack remained a cherished memory, a symbol of the turning point that had changed everything. Though Emily no longer lived there, she visited often, tending to the small clearing and the trees that had witnessed her transformation. The shack was a reminder of the fragile beginnings from which strength could grow, and of the woman named Rose whose words and courage had guided her through the darkest times. Emily's days were now filled with the rhythms of motherhood and the steady rebuilding of her life. She balanced the joys and challenges of raising Lily with the work of healing old wounds and forging new connections. Each step forward was marked by determination and grace, a reflection of the journey from despair to hope that had defined the past year. Friends from the nearby town often stopped by, offering laughter and support, their presence a balm to Emily's once isolated soul. Daniel, the kind stranger who had first offered companionship in the woods, remained a steadfast friend, a living thread in the tapestry of her renewed life. Together, they celebrated milestones and shared quiet moments, their bond a testament to the power of human connection. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the windows, Emily sat with Lily nestled in her arms, reading aloud from the notebook where she had chronicled her journey. The pages held the story of a young woman who had faced heartbreak, fear, and solitude, and had emerged with a fierce determination to live boldly and love fiercely. As she turned the pages, Emily's eyes lingered on Rose's words, a gift from the past that had become a guiding light. The shack's legacy was woven into the fabric of her life, a source of strength and inspiration that would carry her forward. Looking down at her daughter's serene face, Emily felt a profound sense of gratitude and hope. The path had been difficult, marked by moments of doubt and darkness, but it had led her to this place of peace and possibility. The future stretched out before them, bright and uncharted, filled with the promise of new beginnings. With a soft smile, Emily closed the notebook and kissed Lily's forehead. The warmth of their bond, a quiet celebration of resilience and love. The shack, the forest, and the woman named Rose had all played their part in shaping this moment, a testament to the enduring power of courage and the human spirit. As the afternoon light faded into the gentle hues of evening, Emily held her daughter close, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, with an open heart and unwavering strength. The journey was far from over, but she faced it with hope, grounded in the legacy of the shack and the promise of a new dawn.